It was called All I Want for Christmas. We were talking about the things that really matter most, the things that are or should be on our Christmas lists. And it's been a fun series for me personally. I know I've enjoyed it. I've gotten positive feedback from many of you. It was one that we intentionally did backwards, where instead of starting with the lighter stuff, the things that kind of apply to everyone, and then working your way toward Jesus, we started with Jesus and we worked backwards. And I wanted to do that because this time of year, not unlike what Nanette said, there are distractions. You know, you might really think, man, I would love a new PlayStation, but that's not really what you need or what you should really want for Christmas. Or maybe it's, I would love to get up and see one of those car commercial things where there's a brand new car with that great big huge bow that you have no idea where they got it, parked in your driveway. That's one of those things where maybe that's what I really, really want for Christmas. But I can tell you from personal experience and things that I have seen throughout my life that that's not something that you guys would use every day. Like, it would last you for a while. You might get 10, 12 years out of it, maybe, best case scenario. But there would come a day where that car would lose its luster, that PlayStation would be replaced with something new, and there would be things that come along that would be more impressive to you than that. So we've been talking through the things that you would want for Christmas that will matter the most. And tonight we're closing out with the topic of peace. Now, at Christmas time, this topic is very near and dear to my heart because I walked into a service not unlike this, probably 12 or maybe even 14 years ago. And I was a person who was struggling. I was not angry at God necessarily, but I know that my connection with him was broken in some way, that I wasn't praying like I should. I wasn't reading my Bible. I still believed that God existed, but I had been going through so much church hurt and so much anger that I didn't want anything to do with God. So what did I do? I recognized eventually that I had no peace. I wasn't comfortable in my relationship with God, and I wanted to figure out a solution. So I came to a service like this, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to put all of the weight and all of the trust and all of the faith and all of the things that I need on the words of the pastor that stood up on a platform not unlike this. So I came to the service, I let him preach, I heard what he had to say, I heard him going through all of the stuff that he was talking about, and I waited until the very end of the service. And there were people who were shaking his hand and telling him he had done a great job and given a great message. And in the midst of that moment, I waited my turn. And I walked up to him and I said, Pastor, here's my problem. I don't feel like I have the connection to God that I should. I don't feel like I know where I fit in the things that God wants me to be doing. I've got struggle, I've got turmoil, I'm not happy about things, I'm frustrated just all the time. I don't know where I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to be doing. And then I waited. I waited for him to open his mouth and share with me the enlightening words that would give me the clarity and the direction and point me back to God the way I needed him to. I came to that service waiting and desperately wanting that in that moment. And here's the verse that he read for me. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare or good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And that verse did precisely nothing for me. I looked at that verse and I said, I don't see me in that verse. Yes, he says he has a plan for me, and I get that. I get that God has plans and that he has things in motion and he orchestrates things and he works things to bring him glory and he works things to use even the worst of circumstances to draw people closer to him. But it didn't answer the question for me of where I fit in God's plan, and it didn't help me. And I walked out of that service just as frustrated and just as hurting and just as lacking in peace as I did when I walked in, except for maybe a little bit more so because the one place where I'd put my hope fell through as well. The one thing that I was missing from everything was peace with God. It wasn't that I didn't believe that there was a God. I did. I believed that he was there. I believed that he created me. I had hope and I had faith and I had trust in him, but I didn't know what he wanted me to be doing. I didn't know why I was here. And that was a struggle for me. Now, I'm not going to say that the words I'm going to say here tonight, if you're in a similar position, are going to give you any more enlightenment than what I got that evening. I don't have that ability to say that this is going to fix that for you. But what I can say is when I sat down and I prayed through this sermon and I wrote it and I thought about it, I was asking God, what do you want me to say to someone who would come in and they're in the same sort of circumstance or in that same mental situation that I was in? How do I help them have peace with you? And he said, start it off. He didn't say it audibly. If God did that, I'd pass out and freak out. So he didn't actually speak it to me, but he laid it on my heart to say, you need to break it down into the different categories of people, because everybody walks into a church with a different mentality. And the first group, if it's not you, hang in there. And if the second group isn't you, hang in there. Because I'm going to be talking about 3 groups of people, and you will hopefully find yourselves in one of them. All right? So the first group of people are the ones who are the skeptics. Now, I'm not going to ask you to self-identify as a skeptic. I'm not going to ask you to do anything embarrassing or anything like that. But in a room this size, or with the people who may watch this later, I think it's safe to assume we've got at least 1 or 2 of you in the room. I think that that's probably a reasonable assumption. And for you, you ask questions like this. How do I know that any of this is real? I want proof. I want die-hard, ironclad, irrefutable proof that God is God, that God is real, and that God exists. That's what I would want to give me peace. I'm going to tell you a story. There were men and women, boys and girls at the time, that grew up with Jesus. They were his brothers and sisters. And even when Jesus was walking on earth and he was doing all of the miracles that he had done, and he was saying all of the things that he had said, and he was teaching everything that he taught, even they didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And they grew up with him, which means undoubtedly they heard from Mary and Joseph about the angel and about the star and about the wise men and about everything that had occurred that we talk about this time of year. They heard all of it from Mary and Joseph, and they still didn't believe that Jesus was Messiah. Let's take a look at what John says about it. He actually paints a pretty clear picture. Jesus' brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, where your followers can see your miracles. You can't become famous if you hide like this. If you can do such wonderful things, show yourself to the world." Now, I intentionally read that wrong. See, we read that and we think, oh, well, they're encouraging him to go out and do and go and be. But that's not how this should be read. It should be read like this: leave here, go to Judea, where your followers can see all your miracles and everything that you do. You can't become famous if you hide like this. If you can do such wonderful things, show yourself to the world. The antagonism in that statement is real, because the next verse he follows it up with is this: for even his brothers didn't believe in him. They didn't trust. They didn't have faith. They looked at their brother and said, "You and mom and dad, y'all are nuts. This isn't real. What are you guys thinking? None of this actually happened. How far round the bend have you guys gone?" It wasn't until after Jesus came back from the dead, when he was resurrected, that James, one of his brothers, finally said, "You are the Messiah." Bottom line, they wanted proof. Just like many of you, the ones who say that you're skeptics, you would also want proof. Now, I've had conversations with people who are skeptics. And many times they will tell me things like, if God would just do one simple thing, one small thing in the midst of my life, I would recognize and understand that he's God and I would believe in him forever. I would shout it from the rooftops. I would scream it from the streets. I would let everyone know that I believe that he's God. I actually had one person tell me once that if they just took a ball and they tossed it in the air, and the ball just hung, suspended in midair for just a half a second, just enough for them to see that that was proof that God was real, that then they would believe in him, then they would trust, and then they would know that he's real. Now I'm going to tell you, these are going to be thrown out amongst you. It's not going to hit anybody. I'm going to throw it right down the center aisle, but I didn't want anyone to duck and cover. So they would say that if the ball went out and just hung in the air for only a moment, where only they could see it, that they would never question again that God is real. That's the kind of proof that they would want, for God to demonstrate to them that it's real and it's true and they can grab onto it. The thing is, you already have proof that God is real, that he is true, that he exists. The fact that you exist here, now, in this moment, that you're walking, that you're talking, that you're breathing, that you're on a planet that is exactly the right distance from the sun to still have water, that you're on a planet that has the exact right atmosphere for you to be able to live, the fact that out of 7 billion people, the right molecules and atoms and sperm and egg came together and created you, is the proof that you need that God is real. But it's still not enough. It's still not enough for some people. They still look at it and say, but you don't understand, Matt, there's so many things that go against that. I really need that ball to just stay suspended in midair. If it could just stay floating for a half a second, it would have been enough. It would have been enough for me to then believe, but it didn't. So now I don't. And I don't trust, and I can't believe. And the problem is, this is not a new thing. It's not because of other religions. It's not because of other structures of belief. It's not because of anything like that. I'm going to share with you a parable of Jesus. In this parable, Jesus is telling a story. He's using an example to be able to drive home a point, and we're going to understand exactly what he's saying by reading this parable. He's talking about a rich man who was cast into hell, or at that time, Sheol, but could see what was happening in what was heaven at the time to be able to understand what was going on. That a poor man is being blessed in heaven, and this rich man is suffering in Sheol, and he's crying out for help to Abraham, who's up in heaven. Then the rich man said, "Please, Father Abraham, at least send him," the poor man, "to my father's home. For I have 5 brothers, and I want him to warn them so that they don't end up in this place of torment." But Abraham said, "Moses and the prophets have warned them. Your brothers can read what they wrote." The rich man said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone is sent to them from the dead, then they will repent of their sins and turn to God." But Abraham said, "If they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't be persuaded, even if someone rises from the dead." Here's what that means. If you're trying to get peace with God, and God were to take the time to suspend this ball in midair, which he still didn't do, but if he had, you would still be tasked with the burden of, okay, now I believe, and I will tell everyone that I know, and I will share it with anyone and everyone who's ever met me to know that God exists and he's real. But they're still skeptics. And they're going to say to you, maybe it was the gravitational polarity of the earth on its axis that caused it to hang in the air, or maybe we intersected with a parallel dimension that had stopped the ball just long enough, because they're not going to believe anything that you have to say. Just like there are times where when someone like me stands up somewhere like here, you don't want to believe what I have to say either. And I get that, because the relationship with God, the peace that you want to get from God, has to be something that you experience. It can't be something that I just simply tell you about. It has to be lived, and that's the way it plays out. The second group of people, I'm not ignoring the first group of people, but I want you guys to understand that if you're a skeptic, I can't drag you kicking and screaming to the foot of the cross. You're either going to believe or you're not. I can show you the way, I can explain to you what I've seen, and I can come alongside you and try and help you understand, but I can't force it upon you. But the second group of people are the ones that struggle with this question. Where is God when my life is hard? When I'm dealing with grief, when I'm dealing with pain, when I'm dealing with losing a job, when I'm dealing with losing a spouse, when I'm dealing with losing a parent, when I'm dealing with my marriage coming to an end, where is God when life is so hard that I don't know what to do next? You're presented with two options. In that moment, you have two options. You can either run toward God and seek out his comfort and seek out his mercy and seek out his love, or you can run away from God and blame him for all of it and say, God, this is your fault that all of this went down. It's your fault that all of this happened. Running away from God leaves you still dealing with the problems, still dealing with the frustration, still dealing with the hurt and the grief and the agony of whatever the situation might have been. It might be that your great Aunt Ruth was laying there on her hospital bed and you prayed for God to heal her and God said no, and Aunt Ruth died, and you're still upset with God because of how that played out. It might be a situation like that, and you ran away from God because you were angry at him. And you're still running and you're still angry, and that pain and that hurt and that sorrow and suffering and grief has not yet gotten any better. And you don't know why. The other option is to run toward God and say, God, I know that you are all-knowing and that you're omniscient and omnipotent and omnipresent, that you're everywhere all the time, that you know everything, that you can see everything and understand everything, and that there must have been a reason for why this played out. And while I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to understand, and yeah, God, I'm still a little bit mad at you, I'm going to keep running towards you because I know that you'll comfort me through all of that. Because that is what I need in this moment. We're going to look at the words of Jesus specifically in Matthew. He says, this is an area of the Bible called the Beatitudes, where it says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God will provide you comfort if you go to him. If you seek out his help and you seek out his mercy and his grace. And the third piece of this puzzle, the third part of it that we're looking at is this. We've looked at two different ways that you need to find peace with God. And that would be for the skeptic. That would be for the person who says, you know, I once believed in God, but now I'm not so sure. And now we're going to look at all of you Jesus followers that are in the room. You specifically, this is for you, when we talk about peace with each other. Because the question that you often ask is something along this line. Will being a Jesus follower make my life better? Or why is my life not better since I'm a Jesus follower? There's, again, two ways to look at this. When you're a Jesus follower, you're encouraged to be in community with other Jesus followers. It's called church. It's called literally going through and doing life together. The problem is when you let people get close to you, they can hurt you. They can. There are going to be people who do and say things that are hurtful and hard to hear, and they're going to just rub up against you the wrong way, and it's going to create animosity and friction between you and another person, and you're going to look at it and say, I don't want to deal with this. And you can either cut them out, cut them off, and walk away, or you can say, you know what? I'm going to look at this the second way. When you let people get close to you, they can help you. Because it is a two-sided coin. It is a double-edged sword. Where this is something where people, when they get near you and get to become close with you, they can hurt you and you're opening yourself up to that, but they can also help you when you're dealing with things that are hard and things that are tough. And you can have either of those in your life. Here's what Paul says in Galatians. He says, share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. So go through life together. Understand what's going to happen. But don't forget the reason that you're doing it. It's this law specifically. I'm going to ask you guys to read the underlined portions with me on this. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Wouldn't life be better if we did? Wouldn't it be better if in sharing the things that we're dealing with and sharing the things that we're going through and the heartaches and the trials that we face, being able to lean on one another for support? I can tell you right now, me walking into that church, walking in, waiting for that pastor to be able to give me the silver bullet, the golden ticket, whatever it was that I expected him to tell me in that moment that was the easy pass into the express lane of being better and having greater peace with God, I wouldn't have been having to look so hard for it if I'd had a community of believers beside me that I was doing life with and said, hey guys, I'm struggling. I need help. I'm hurting. So if you want to break it down into three things, as you're looking for peace with God, and you're looking for peace this time of the year, I would phrase it like this. Acknowledge being created is step one. If you're that skeptic, recognize that the likelihood in your belief structure even, not in mine, but that the likelihood of your existence on a planet of 7 billion people at this time of life, in this particular moment, is highly unlikely to have even been plausible. Start with the fact that that means that there was a creator. Start with that fact first. Once you've understood that and you get to that point, you need to seek him out. You need to figure out what it is that he's got for you and what it means and where you go from here. Because if God can grant comfort and he can grant peace, he's going to be able to answer some of those challenges and answer some of those questions. And third is this: find genuine community. Get involved with a group of people that say, you know what, I know that you're going to say things that are stupid and insensitive and you're going to hurt me, but I'm going to love you through it anyway. Because I am that person. I will be the person who will love you through it, but I will also be the person who says things that are stupid and insensitive and does stuff to hurt you. It's not intentional. It happens. When you put two people in a room, there's going to be conflict. It doesn't matter if it's over something as deep as theological issues or something as minimal as thermostat setting. There's going to be conflict. It's just how it plays out. When we look at what we can do for one another, and Wendy, I'm going to ask you to go over and get ready to hit the wings lights if you would. When we look at what we can do for one another, it's how we can give things to those who are around us. It's how we can do the stuff that we need to do in order to help people understand how important they are. When you came in here tonight, you were all given candles. If you haven't gotten a candle, just throw your hand up in the air real quick if you would. All right. Or if you are a child and you wanted a glow stick instead, or mom and dad, if you think it's wiser for the child to have a glow stick, we can totally do that too. Or if you're an adult and said, no, anyway. It's one of those things where we are given something from Christ. We're given peace. We're given hope. We're given love in the midst of all of the things that we do. In the midst of the way all of these things happen, in the midst of how things are hard and how there's skepticism and how there's challenge and trial and turmoil, we have a God in heaven who said, I love you. I want to be there to comfort you. I want to be there to help you. And I want you to be there to help and comfort and support each other. So as we're lighting these candles here in just a moment, we're going to sing Silent Night. Once we get everyone kind of squared away here, we're going to have this process happening. It's going to be, we're going to get all the lights turned down and everything like that. But we're going to look at this flame that passes from person to person to person. And I'm going to go ahead and actually start here with Becca and Heather. But we're going to look at it and say, these are the things that God has given us. And there may be people in your life who you know right now that are hurting, that are struggling, and they are desperately in need for someone to come alongside them and say, hey, let me give you a hand. Let me help you back up. That's the role that you can take on in their lives. So we're going to ask you guys to go ahead and begin if you would, and we'll be lighting the candles along the way. Just let me go ahead and stand up, Laura. The person with the flame is going to have the other person tip their candle in and take it. I simply request it like this so we don't get wax just everywhere. It makes it easier for our cleaning staff. So with that, let's stand together and sing Silent Night.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother.